People who get stuck in the minutia and working in the business need to learn to trust other people. They need to realize that their vision is bigger than themselves. Any vision should come from something greater than yourself, which means it does not terminate in yourself. So if the vision for a business, which it should be a vision, is greater than you, then there's capacity for other people to lend to the vision.
I'm your host, Nick McLean, and this is Ambition. Yoga has been practiced for over 5,000 years, predating Hinduism as part of the ancient Vedic culture. It's withstood the test of time, and for anything that's been around for so long, especially where religion is concerned, bringing change and new ideas can be intimidating. The people that decide to break that mold and bring something different to the table take on that risk, but also get that reward of innovation. I sat down with Brooke Beardall, creator of Holy Yoga, offering classes as well as 100, 200, and 300-hour instructor training for Christ-centered yoga. The original yoga wanted nothing to do with this contemporary spin, and some Christians referred to it as demonic. She found throughout her entire entrepreneurial journey, change is a constant factor. New technology, new systems, and various processes and procedures to implement, things are always evolving. The secret? Having the right time to keep it all in motion. Brooke has a lot of faith in her team, knowing employees that you can trust will keep the wheels turning as the company grows and evolves.
There was a time when we were certifying, 400, 500 people a year, and that required much more than me. And so the season of growth created like this deep fracture in my ability to facilitate the training the way it needed to. It grew almost too fast, too soon. And so then I did a bunch of hiring, and I got so far away from why I started doing it in the first place that if you were to look from outside and we're training, we have 6,000 instructors internationally. I mean, people would say, wow, that's incredible. And it was, and the growth was amazing, but those are not my favorite seasons of Holy Yoga. Is when the outside looking in, you would be like, wow, there's so many people there. Those were not my favorite seasons. Those were much harder than the 7 people I met with at the church when I was 8 months pregnant in different ways. But I think each season, and there are seasons, if you're around long enough, everything works in seasons. And I'm not talking just annual, they're like large sections of energetic completion. So things start, 7 is a completion number. So every 7 years, there is a genesis, not only of you as a human being, but relationships and circumstances and calls and desires and, passion, it all shifts. So if you are around like we are, 19 years almost, there are 7 major shifts, or 7-year shifts, so we've gone through 2 of them already, nearing our 3rd. And so, we've been a million different things in a million different seasons. But I also think that you have to create systems that are malleable. They execute on the vision for the season and for the reason. And when those seasons and reasons change, you have to be malleable enough and responsive enough to move with it. Otherwise, you die. Otherwise, it becomes archaic, it becomes outdated, and it doesn't move with it,
For sure. One theme that we talk to a lot of guests on the show about is the need for processes and procedures as the company grows, not only because you need redundancy so that Joe or Sam or Mary, whoever, if they take a vacation or they win the lottery or whatever the case may be, that you can fill that person's role. However, from our perspective, it's also the structural foundation that you need in order to take those next steps in a company's growth. Can you talk to me about your philosophy, the implementation you have made of various systems and processes and procedures and how that's impacted the company?
Yeah. Gosh, that's such a great question. I could not agree more that processes and procedures are paramount to any type of growth, and we're constantly growing. So sometimes it's a season of external growth, sometimes it's a season of internal growth, but we're always progressing, we're always in growth. Because I believe like in the days that are like small days where you're in your process internally, those are actually creating the stability and the foundation for the larger days, right? And so for the larger seasons and reasons. So we have, gosh, I've been so resistant. I tried so long to like be resistant to technology. And so my company is run really well. We do online training. So we have a number of different technological platforms and systems and calendars that help us to execute on that. But we use a number of different platforms. We hire the very best people. So the gentleman who runs our technology is the very best. The gentleman or the female who runs all of our social, she works with the platforms and she integrates. So lots of those processes, weekly meetings with agendas are paramount to executing on strategy. I think strategy is as important as any type of process. I think it's the beginning of any process. So if it's, for example, customer acquisition, it's very important that we understand the priority of customer acquisition, what it means, how valuable it is, and then we'll build systems to support that customer acquisition, not the other way around. So I've had seasons where I've built systems based on people's liking, where it would make their job easier. Well, I'm not really interested. That's not the objective of the company, to make someone's job easier. The objective of the company is to get as many people into training programs so they can affect the world around them wherever they are across the globe. So whatever process we develop now is not based on personal desire or likes or needs. It's really based on what's the priority of the company, how are we executing that strategy, and then we get after that. And there's measurable steps, right? So, but the processes allow us to, move the ball, to run the play.
Well, I'd like to push back on that a little bit about what you said about how you don't want to make the job for your employees easier. One of the principles of four pillars, with four pillars, four things we stand for, is servant leadership. And in our view, one way to summarize servant leadership is to remove the obstacles so that your employees can perform at their fullest. I think you can make the argument that if you remove some obstacles from your employees, you are making their job easier. So I think we might be mincing words here, but could you just expand on that a little bit?
Well, I think it's more of like, I love making it easier on my people. The last thing I want to do is make it difficult. I think what makes it difficult is if we're not aligned on what the objectives of the company are. And so I guess what I love processes and procedures. I love making sure that the systems are not burdened with extra tasks or requirements, or that people are doing things that they're really gifted with. So I'll just start by saying that. But I had seasons, because I liked my employees, where I created systems to their liking. Maybe a little bit too much of like, I'm serving them maybe a little too much because the objectives now of the company are a little bit jaded, or maybe they believe that their likes and desires for the way things should operate don't necessarily benefit the objective. It's more of a preference. So that's what I mean about systems supporting the objective of the company, because I also have had employees where they thought it was, my responsibility to make them happy at work. And while I want to create an environment that's amazing, I'm not responsible for happy. I'm responsible for effectful, respectful. I have a lot of responsibilities, but happy is not one of them,
I don't know if this statistic is still true. They've obviously done a lot of research since the late 90s when I was learning about this. But in the late 90s, they did some research about in industrial and organizational psychology about the correlation between employee satisfaction and employee effectiveness. And again, at the time, there wasn't a positive correlation between employee happiness and employee effectiveness. They thought employee happiness was a subject that they should continue to study because it's important on its own, but not with no correlation. That's the first thing that came to mind when you started talking about your answer, that we're not here to make people happy. We have a job to do. However, in doing that job, we want it to be fulfilling and whatnot, but this isn't just a group of folks getting together around a card table and playing games on a Friday night. We got a job to do.
Yes.
Another topic you brought up that I would like to explore a little bit more is how you said that you're resistant to tech. We talk to all sorts of business owners, all different ages, all different industries, and I guess different spots along the continuum of how willing they are to adopt technology. Sometimes we'll talk to business owners that adopt way too much technology. They think it's almost a cure for any problems that they have in their business. Now, I heard you say that you were actually resistant, not just on the fence, not just, oh, I don't know about tech, so I'm not going to implement it. You said, I'm resistant to technology. Can you talk to us about your mindset regarding that philosophy or thought?
Yeah, it's like the first time I realized I was getting old, I was like, wow, I've arrived. Like, right? Like, I'm not even that old. I'm using air quotes, but I realized when I was like, I have no interest in it, in knowing how it works. It became such a frustration point for me. And I was like, that's it. I just have to hire the best. I have to get a consultant that tells me what I need. They're not selling me anything. I am like the ultimate strategist. I need a good whiteboard. Somebody tell me what I need. I'm going to tell you what the process is. Tell me what technology I need in order to take care of the objective, which is providing world-class training. And so I personally am resistant. I still use a paper calendar. Okay. Yes, it's true. It's a personal thing, but my business, I realized very early that I had to adopt and that we had to get good at that because there is no business without the technology. So I think my personal resistance was like, I just don't want to learn something new. But I just align myself and my company with the very best who do know. They forgot this morning more than I'll ever know about that kind of stuff. And so in that way, we've been able to adopt without me getting in the way too much,
Well, I need to commend you on two different fronts. The first front is that many business owners we talk to are not so willing to confront their resistance to technology directly. It's more along the lines of an answer, oh, we don't need that. We don't need that. When in reality, it's just a resistance to learn that or hire the best people as you did. So I'll commend you for having the objective introspection, if you will, in order to determine that. The second one, I need to tell a little bit of a story. In graduate school, I had a professor in operations management who was teaching about lean manufacturing, process improvement, and whatnot. And what he said is that a lot of folks that are early on in process improvement, they go straight to technology, whereas the more experienced practitioners, do you know what they start with? They start with a whiteboard, just like you. And he said his point was that you don't need technology to improve a process. The first part is understanding the process. And I think that is part and parcel with your philosophy, because you also mentioned that even within the strategic planning, there's still a process there. Could you just expand on that a little bit more about, it seems like you're very process oriented and that.
I am, only because I've done it so wrong for so many years, and so now my latest season of being in business is like optimizing my time and my output. So not just my resources, but like where I'm spending my time and how I feel when I'm spending my time there. And so understanding the process helps me to manage my everyday time effectively. So when I look at a whiteboard and I go, okay, so the process is we're putting 200 people through training, right? And so we back that all the way up and we eat the elephant in small parts, then that's what's ultimately going to take us to where we need to go. So I will use technology in the places that technology is required, but I'm not going to build the strategy and the process around the technology. I think that's kind of what you're saying is some people do that and then they go, okay, well, this is what technology does, and so we're going to do it this way. It's like, no, we do it this way, and technology is going to support, or we're going to change the process in order to find technology that will support, right? But ultimately, it's our direction, it's our process. wanted to say something too, because I was like going back just maybe a minute or two, or maybe five now, I don't know. But when you said we were talking about happiness, and I think when we can do this, when we can take the people that we work with and show them the process, get them on board with, like, that's the fulfilling thing, is that we're on team together in order to execute on this vision or this particular thing. So their happiness comes from not just their happiness, but their fulfillment and their participation in the fulfillment of that goal, you know? So the understanding the process is to understand the goal. And then we go, okay, this is what you do, and this is what you do, and you throw the ball, and you run the ball, and you bring water, and you and then I think they're fulfilled and happiest when they're actually executing. But if you don't give that, and technology is required, like how do even our employees interact with the technology if they're not in charge of the process? They have to stay in charge of the process.
Well, and then the natural scapegoat in that situation becomes the technology. You need to improve the technology because it's not working. And then you're just getting this self-perpetuating doom loop, essentially.
Yes. Oh my, and poor tech people, like, God bless America for all the CTOs in every company, because I feel for it. Yeah. But yeah, they are the absolute scapegoat. And they also, I think technology, just, you never know what you're going to come up against. It's not even that your CTO or your people want to tell you there's going to be a delay. It's just the nature of technology is that it's unpredictable in delivery. And so we wind up waiting, or at least my experiences sometimes are waiting on this thing to actually execute what the vision of the business is. So it's just, like you said earlier, it's like a catch-22. It's tough sometimes.
You know, it sounds like you've done a good job of making the transition from working in the business to working on the business. Was that a conscious decision you made? Did it come naturally? Were you forced to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I literally had a season, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago now, where I abandoned the business. Like, I was so over it. It was so, and you know what it was? It was my own personal kind of turning over every 7 years, right? So it's like, it was part of me, almost like I didn't know if I could coexist with the company that I had created. There was this religious component, there was this training component. And in both of those things, people don't want to, but they worship anything and everything. And so they kind of put me in a situation, or I put myself in a situation, all those things are true, to love the business for what it gave me. And then when I started changing and I started being a different version of myself, I wasn't sure that the company could sustain it. And so I walked away completely. And I was like, it was kind of a forced stop for me. And I was like, hey, if it lasts, it lasts. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I kind of went in with that idea. And, 7 or 8 years later, I'm really back at it. I have a renewed sense of ownership in it. I'm ready. I have space and time. And so I forgot the original question, to be honest.
No, that was very helpful, but it was just talking about the transition from working on or working in the business.
Okay. Yes. So I think for those stages and that space away from the company, I wasn't working in or on. Before I left, I was working in it. It was my 30 hours a week. I was running teams. I had a large staff. And as I've come back to it, the systems are in place. The people are in place. And now I'm able to work on it. I can drive it because it needed a driver, it needed a leader, and I'm able to do that because everyone on team knows how to get the job done. So I'm working on it now after seasons of working in it and then totally abandoning it, and then now coming back to it. But I don't know that I would have come back to it had I needed to work in it in this season. I would have probably chosen not to.
I think it's very interesting. Sometimes we'll talk to business owners, and it's clear that they can't get past that working in the business, and it's almost as if they know within their heart of hearts that it's because they enjoy that level of detail within the business. And it's almost, sometimes it's sad because you really see the business has a lot of potential, if they were just able to make that shift from, or make the shift that you did to go from working on the business to working in the business. As you described it there, though, going back to an earlier question, it sounds like a lot of your problems have resolved themselves because you got all those systems and processes and procedures in place. But I know better than that. Can you just talk to me about the different types of problems you're facing now that a lot of that day-to-day minutia, administrivia, if you will, has been resolved through the process and procedures and the challenges you face now?
Well, the challenges always are, processes and procedures take money to not just set up, but also to maintain. So I have a payroll because my processes and my procedures are there. So things before, when I was doing everything, I didn't have the payroll, I didn't have the expense. And so it's a different type of hard because now we have to focus on customer acquisition, business development. And if you're not good at business development, if you don't have energy about getting in front of people, you will stay in the minutia. You will stay committed to your process because that's where you're comfortable. And that's, so what's the question? I wrote down, I don't know where I was thinking of, but what you asked me just a bit ago is the people who get stuck in the minutia and working in the business need to learn to trust other people. They need to realize that their vision is bigger than themselves. Any vision should come from something greater than yourself, which means it does not terminate in yourself. So if the vision for a business, which it should be a vision, is greater than you, then there's capacity for other people to lend to the vision. And so if we can't be hoarders of vision, we have to be inviters. So we want to be on team with people who we trust, who, when I say to you that I hire the best, I do that for selfishly, not because I like to have a bigger payroll, because the best costs more, but because I can sleep at night, knowing that when my website goes down, I don't have to get up in the middle of the night and call help support. I call the guy who I pay money to do the best job. I call him and he does it. So there's that, but it does require you working on the business. And if you don't like business development or networking or being vulnerable, that can be really scary. I also think too, a reason why we stay so kind of committed to the day-to-day is we find so much of our identity in our business and in our work. And so I would want to challenge anyone that's listening to this that if you really struggle taking even one finger off the wheel, too many eggs are in that basket. Too much of the way you feel about yourself, too much the way you feel about success or your ability to do something and only you can do it. I just would want to challenge that because that's just such a burden. That's so unnecessary. So I think check your identity and then surround yourself with people you can trust.
I think that's great counsel. Unfortunately, I'm not going to let you off the hook so easily just to say that I encourage you to trust your team and whatnot, because we talk to a lot of folks, not just business owners, but leaders in general. And the feedback sometimes from certain leaders, that is that I can't let my team do what they need to do because they're not capable, or I have to provide all this oversight because of X, Y, and Z. Is that true? Maybe or maybe not. But based off your leadership style, if you had a manager that was telling you that type of story, how would you work with that person?
Well, I wrote down you hired wrong. Not you, me. If I'm struggling with that, it's like I have to look at my leadership and go, oh, I hired wrong. Like, I don't think and it's not even they're wrong. It's like, I'm wrong. It's like, I must not have communicated the vision. I must not, or I didn't, maybe I wasn't decisive enough. So I would get curious. I would get curious. I would ask questions that would better my leadership. But those are really brave things because it's really hard for us to admit when we make a mistake. And so I think it's like recognizing I may have made a mistake with the employee, but also I made a mistake in hiring the employee. You know what I'm saying? that answer it? I mean, when you say trust your team, it's like, we don't do that. It's like, because if they're not competent, you hired them for a reason. Maybe you enjoy their inability to be competent so that you can stay over committed, so you can helicopter. Maybe that's where you're strong. And so, and also it's like, if that's where you're strong, know that. If you are a better manager than you are a leader, there's room for everybody. It's like, know that, accept that about yourself and be like, okay, I am a manager, and then communicate that. When you're so here's my level of leadership. I tend to manage pretty tightly, and I want to see how you feel about that. And if they're like, I love being micromanaged, then that's the right hire, right? So I think as a leader, you have to go, oh, I may have made the wrong hire. I may have made a mistake.
Well, it's a great point, because there certainly are times when the role dictates that manager have his or her finger on the pulse and be involved in that, maybe because of the problem, maybe because of the team or whatever. I guess, if I were to make some interpretations from what you said, it's really situation based. And as the company owner, as the person where the buck stops, there needs to not only be introspection, but there needs to be analysis of each of your team members to make sure that you have leaders where you need leaders and you have managers where you have managers.
Yes, 100%, because there's room for both. There's nothing wrong with either. What becomes troublesome is if we try and be something that we're not. And then there's expectations for a leader when there needs to be a manager, because there's places for both. Also, I would say as a leader, like, your people are showing they're showing you who they are. So if you're struggling with someone's output, if you're struggling, maybe it's something, maybe you didn't set clear expectations. Maybe you just really can't stand them and you probably shouldn't have, but just personality wise, you're like, wow, I should not have done this. Please make a decision and execute on the decision. Don't be long suffering, put everyone out of their misery if that's the case. There was a Harvard Business Review last year that talked about maybe it was 2 years ago now, but the article was like the most important attribute of a leader or CEO, and it was decisiveness. Because even if they make the wrong decision, they're able to make a decision. And they're able to say when they've made a bad decision or a good decision, right? And they're able to be decisive and change, and they don't have this long-suffering, ego-driven downfall. You know what I'm saying? So I think just making a decision, but they're showing you, it's okay to have made the wrong decision and the wrong hire. It's not, you're in full control, but your people, when they show up, they're showing up as them. Don't impart some sort of magical fairy dust. They are showing you how, and if you're like, well, I like to micromanage and they really don't like it. Well, they're not going to begin liking it. They're not going to change. So as a leader, as a business owner, you are in control, and you need to be. And not lead with the steel fist either, be really kind. I have people that have worked for me for 14 years. So I feel like, there's room for all of it.
One thing that I've noticed in talking to you is a very high level of introspection, or maybe you haven't done a lot of introspection, but at the very least, you definitely know who you are. I don't think a lot of people have been forced to really try to understand who they are, what drives them, and whatnot. Perhaps that came from your religion, perhaps it came from someplace else. But to listeners out there, to business owners that perhaps haven't been in a position where they've really been forced to get to know who they are, what drives them, could you offer any advice or suggestions as to how they might do that, why it's important, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, thank you. This is my favorite thing to talk about, truly, because I think knowing ourselves holistically benefits everyone, including ourselves and the world. But introspection is just a discipline. I want to keep short accounts with myself. When I don't want to get too far away from the way that I'm feeling, the ways that I'm thinking, the way that I'm believing, and the way that I'm acting. So the Bible would say it, heart, soul, mind, and strength. But it's really about your intellect. What am I thinking about? What am I knowing in my beliefs, my spirituality? What am I feeling in my emotional body? And then what am I actually doing? What am I feeling in my physical body? And how am I living out of my body. So I think it's important to know that there are 4 parts of us, like I said, intellectual, spiritual, emotional, and then physical. But only one part of ourselves really shows up to ourselves, which is in our body. But all 3 of those other parts of ourselves are informing everything that we experience in our body. So as leaders, we have to understand that how I show up at work has nothing to do with maybe the level of sleep. Maybe it's, I got in a fight with my kids last night. Maybe it's, God, I feel really alone. I'm in grief. I have all of these. You just have to keep short accounts with all the parts of ourselves. What am I believing about myself today? What am I believing about my circumstance? What am I believing about the fact that I'm negative in my bank account and payrolls tomorrow? All of those things matter. And I think what we do is we disassociate and we just go, I'm just going to focus on the small tasks at work. I'm going to go and I'm going to grind it out. And all of the other parts of us are informing that physical expression of ourselves at work. So introspection is a discipline, I think, of just keeping short accounts. Like, I'm not afraid of what I'm feeling. I'm not afraid of what I'm believing. And they're not great things all the time. I'm human. I fall short every day, all the time. And so I think just forgiving myself, finding grace for myself, it helps me to be a more well-rounded leader, showing up to myself. So I just think the best way to do that, that's why I do it. And make a discipline of it. Check in with yourself every day on your way to work. What am I thinking about today? And how do I feel about that today? Whatever I'm thinking about. Am I mad? Am I sad? Am I encouraged? So I think short accounts, just checking in with yourself and figuring out, and then you wind up modeling that. And then people want to be around you. They just want to be around someone who knows who they are,
So perhaps there are some older gentlemen in my audience that would say to you, that is way too touchy-feely for me. I need to leave all those emotions at home or something along those lines. If they were so eloquent to make that statement directly, how would you respond?
Yeah, you should leave it at home. I'm saying process it at home. Touch into yourself. And I'm not saying going into the office and being like, listen, everyone, I'd like to talk to you about what I'm feeling. No, it's more check in with yourself at work or on your way to work, rather. Close the door if you feel frustrated. Get in the discipline of checking in with yourself. It's not okay to lose your temper. It's not okay to gossip. It's not okay to be whatever it is, to check in with yourself, take your time, be disciplined. So touchy-feely is fine. If you don't want to be touchy-feely, then be masculine and be disciplined and shut the door and check in with yourself and don't let yourself lose control. So I would say that to them. You don't have to do it in front of people, but that doesn't excuse you from doing it. And whether you're a man or a woman, if you're 15 or 105, 115, you were created with all of those facets of your being. I don't care if you touch into them or not. That's still part of your creation. That's still part of your experience. And it's still worth looking at.
Technology is always changing. As a business owner, you have to see it as an opportunity for growth. Don't let it intimidate you or hold you back. I love how Brooke saw herself resisting change, but learned to let go and bring an openness as a leader. Holy Yoga has become successful because Brooke put the processes and procedures in place for it to run smoothly without her. She's able to focus on her vision and delegate as a leader, instead of trying to do everything herself. Yoga offers so many different benefits for your mind and body. There's the discipline of committing yourself to it, mindfulness gained from meditation, as well as the flexibility and strength you physically gain from the practice. Much like yoga, being a business owner, you can benefit from committing to yourself, being mindful, and having flexibility with change. If you were inspired by this episode of Ambition, please share it with a friend or colleague. Thanks for listening.